There's a crisis at the border. There's a migrant crisis. A large number of people, the number of people has been scaling up. I think it was like 15,000 over the past month, or I think it was less than a month. I think it was 100,000 in February, if I'm not mistaken. The number of people, human beings, at the border between Trump and Biden has skyrocketed. And it doesn't necessarily seem that Biden has a clear plan of being able to deal with it. The key point here is that Psaki is trying to basically say that the Biden administration is taking a tack of telling people to leave, that Biden and Kamala Harris are standing at the border screaming, "Don't come! Stay the fuck back!" But that doesn't quite seem to be working. I've talked about this for a few times, and I've made the point of why that's not working. You had COVID, which was somewhat of a deterrent. You had Donald Trump, who was screaming and swearing bloody murder to stay out, and that he was going to make their situation a living hell to the degree that he could potentially make their situation a living hell. Well, Biden gets in. And from a tonal standpoint, by itself, it's a shift. Meaning if Biden didn't push hard on that issue, it still would look like a shift. But because of the tack that Democrats took in opposition to Donald Trump, you have what seems to be an administration that is more welcoming. Biden also has taken a choice that we will accept kids. He didn't have to make that choice. He chose to make that choice out of an ethical, I suppose, reasoning. And fair enough. Good on you, buddy. The ethical choice is not a bad thing at all. That is something we should talk about and discuss. Personally, I think it's more ethical to not blow those countries to hell. I think it's more ethical to have a drug policy that doesn't incentivize gangs and, the setting the countries on fire in that way, not backing coups in those governments, or at the very least supporting the coup governments after the fact. There's all sorts of things that we can do that is the ethical, moral choice. Give reparations to those countries that we basically set on fire for our U.S. foreign policy. And when we've supported dictators in those regions of the world and everything else, or kill squads in those regions of the world, yeah, we should make amends for that. We should pay for that. And the point that I'm trying to make here is if you allow those countries not to be basket cases, if you stop setting those countries on fire, if you invest in ensuring those countries can be up to snuff like a Marshall Plan of sorts, but for the South America, especially the countries that have the worst aspects of it, then maybe the people there would decide to raise their kids there instead of taking the treacherous track of coming to the United States. Do you honestly believe that anybody is making that dangerous trek for shits and giggles? Or are they leaving something that is so dramatic and so horrific that it becomes a rational choice to put themselves and their kids on the line for a potential better life for their children? We backed the coup in Honduras. We backed the coup in Bolivia. And in the case of Bolivia, Evo Morales won that race by like 10 points. And the OAS gets involved in that election in order to destabilize it just for the right-wing fascists to kick off. It's almost as if they knew the fascists were about to kick off, like they were some level of coordination between the United States and the fascists and the OAS. Totally seems that way. What are they doing now in Venezuela? The United States is still trying to depose Maduro in Venezuela, even if it meant having this kind of uprising with this kind of violent overthrow. You even had the United States backing Juan Guaido, pretending that he's the president of something, elected by somebody to do something. The only person he was elected by was the United States to destabilize and destroy that government. And in doing so, not caring whether or not the consequences for Venezuela. We've already killed tens of thousands by sanctions alone. What are the consequences? If Juan Guaido got what he wanted, and he was paying, what is it, Silver Corp, whatever the name of that corporation is, that was basically going to take these special forces guys to go in, to take military bases, to foment an uprising. And what immediately happened in the U.S. will say that Venezuela is rising up, when it's really these guys who are basically trying to foment an uprising to overthrow Maduro. They could kill, capture, maim, destroy, blow up anything that they wanted to in pursuit of that contract. Meaning the lives of Venezuelans mattered less than the U.S. having say-so over who runs that country. I am making the point that at no point have we acknowledged that our foreign policy in the South drives the people coming to the border. And we have this magical thinking that we can act any way we want around the world, even South America. And yet we also should be removed from the consequences of those actions, like the border. And that functions in two ways. Yes, is it an ethical choice to allow people into the border? Like I said, it's more ethical not blowing their country to shit. Not everybody can make that journey. And there are many people, the majority, are stuck in those scenarios, in that situation that the United States create, despite the fact that we're perturbed by the people who are coming to the border. Fair enough. But you also have an ethical choice in saying, all right, fair enough, we're going to let the kids in. Just because a choice is ethical doesn't mean that it magically works out. You can make a right choice. Just because it's a good choice doesn't necessarily mean that God gives magic to it where it just automatically works. Joe Biden decided, I am going to be tonally different than Trump. Great. I'm going to turn away adults. Great. I'm going to keep kids. Great. But what is the consequences of that? Adults will bring their kids and they would leave. I want my kid to have a better life. And because of the policy that Joe Biden has accepted, we're going to accept the kids. So what happens? More and more kids come to the border. And when more and more kids come to the border, what does Joe Biden say? I told them that this is not the time to come to the border. Stay away. And yet they say, amigo. Can I bring back Nina? Yes. Fair enough. Meaning, I don't care what you say. If your policy says my kid can stay, that's all that matters. And that is logically what is taking place. The border is jam-packed. It's a mess. And let's be very clear, it's a mess because of the policy that Biden took, not Trump. Whatever you want to say about Trump, fair enough. But the mess at the border right now, the kids in those cages the kids in those cages and these packed conditions, that's on Biden. That's his policy. The New York Times says this. In mid-November, you can see it for yourself. In mid-November, a federal judge ruled that the administration could not expel unaccompanied children. As a result of expulsions, unaccompanied children fell from nearly 3,200 in October to 1,520 in November. An appeals court stayed that ruling in late January, once again allowing the expulsion of children. But the Biden administration has decided against the practice. It continues to send back adults and families. However, the kids can stay. If that is indeed going to be your policy, then you can't be shocked that 15,000 kids are going to show up at the border. Joe Scarborough gets his chance to sink his teeth into this. And he goes after Joe Biden full barrels. He shreds into him. The thing is, and the weirdest part, is that media can never talk about it in the way that it just talked about it. They don't bring up the U.S. drug policy, meaning from the standpoint of what we do in those countries from the standpoint of drugs. They don't bring up the spraying, this kind of indiscriminate spraying of chemicals on various crops and on people for that matter. They don't bring up the usage of drugs in our country and the policy in our country that drives those criminal gangs that those people have to live through. They don't bring up the coups that take place where we are toppling governments to put people in that we prefer as opposed to people we don't like, and that we're still doing it right now. Zelias, Honduras, 80% of the cocaine that goes through South America goes through Honduras. That guy was basically our partner. And that guy, our partner, president of that country, Hernandez, has been trying to put cocaine into the nose of every gringo. At least that's what the prosecution is saying in the case that he is implicated in. Zelias wasn't that way. But Zelias was a troublesome lefty that had his notion of sovereignty and was going to fight for the interests of his country, just like Evo Morales, just like Arce, just like, Jesus Christ, what is his name? Lula, just like Lula. Meaning, if you think what these guys have in common, the people who they're going after, Correa, they put Lula in prison over some nonsense. What's his name was deposed? Evo was deposed over nonsense. You don't see a trend here that it seems to be nonsense and bogus stuff that comes from the United States that tries to supplant the will of the various people in those countries when those people choose people who are in the best interests of those people. In this very specific instance, Biden made a choice. And that choice, whether good, bad, right, wrong, moral, or otherwise, had consequences. Those consequences are being expressed at the border right now. I'm going to say welcome. Damn. I have the wrong intro, and the video is going to be... There we go. Welcome to the soapbox.
But go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Two subject areas. In the spirit of transparency to rebuild public trust, when will reporters be allowed to tour facilities holding children who cross the southern border? And are there any concerns that the images from those tours might show that there's a crisis?
These are the type of questions that Jen Psaki get at the press corps. Hey, Jen, when are we going to be able to go to the border? And are you concerned that the crisis at the border will be perceived as a crisis at the border? They don't have the competence and the capability of looking at what is taking place at the border, seeing 15,000 people just basically spike almost magically, knowing that Biden's policy is basically incentivizing these people to come to the border, and yet make the proclamation on their own. For whatever particular reason, the government's job in this case is to spin and give propaganda. But they seem to be waiting on the government to tell them exactly what's going on. You can't see for yourself that it's a crisis? I mean, for God's sake, look at some of the images that are coming out. If this was the Trump administration, AOC will be at the border crying her eyes out. But this is not the Trump administration. Look at this. Look at this. Aside from the safety concerns of having kids packed together like that, you had kids crying, you had kids who were like on the floor. I mean, that is embarrassing. And whatever you want to say from the standpoint of a moral or ethical policy, you took a choice. And whether you took that choice for the right reason or not, the outcome for that choice was monstrous. You'd have been better off not taking that choice, not incentivizing the people to make that journey, and trying to deal with that stuff in somewhat of a more, organized way. You jumped the gun. And now the border is the consequence. Scarborough is going to dig into Joe Biden in a way that mainstream media, for the most part, is basically giving him a pass. But even Joe Scarborough in this rant doesn't really get to the root of U.S. policy, domestic and foreign, that incentivizes those people from being at the border, nor does it get to the point of making the logical answer that says if you want people to stop coming to the country like that, you need to build up those countries. You need a Marshall Plan. Otherwise, this is just going to keep happening. This is Scarborough laying into Biden over this. Because at this point, Biden is basically saying, I'm telling them not to come. That doesn't matter.
Well, again, I just have to say one more time, like we said yesterday, those children made the journey in the first place because the United States of America now is sending a message to those children. If you journey across the desert, you make a long and dangerous trip, we're going to let you in. And we're going to let you in if you're unaccompanied. And sometimes, and we're going to find this out throughout the show, you can come in and we're not going to even give you a court date. So the administration right now, the Biden administration right now, is the one that's luring these children to the border with the promise of being able to get in. So they can't say, oh, well, they've come all the way across the desert. We can't just let them go back across the desert. No, you can figure out a way, a humane way, a safe way to transport them back home, I suspect. But again, as long as you keep sending the message out.
They're sending a different message
now.
now.
Not yesterday. It's like, oh, no, if they're up here, we're not going to send them back. We're just going to keep them there. And they're also letting families that go and, that come across illegally, they're letting families just dissolve into the country and not have a court date, not have a date to come back. This is, again, why do I bring this up? Can we absorb families? Yes. Can we absorb immigrants? Yes, we can. But a couple of things. First of all, this is what causes the border crisis. You can talk all you want to foreign leaders. You can give as much money as you want to give to these countries, which I believe we need to help these countries. So people don't feel like they have to come to the United States as much. But as long as you have a permissive immigration policy, you're going to have a crisis at the border. And yes, when you have United States senators from Connecticut, Democrats, liberals that are talking about tears in their eyes when they look at the situation that these children are in, that's a crisis at the border. And as long as you have a permissive policy, first of all, again, it's dangerous for the children because more children are going to keep coming until you tell them, no, you can't. We're not going to let you in.
But you do understand they are saying that now. They're sending ads.
No.
Well, no, they are sending ads and stuff, but the catch is that Joe Scarborough in this case is right. Some people take issue with him using the term luring children. And to be fair, Joe Biden didn't necessarily put out a sign and say, hey, we want kids to come. Shane and I got into this back and forth before. It's not that he's saying, hey, come to America, come to America. It's not that. It's that COVID-19 went down. So in one case, that hedge. On the second case, Trump is gone. Democrats were far more permissive on immigration and open to immigration, especially from this thing of trying to get the stuff done. But it's the last point of the change that Joe Biden implemented. And even if you want to say the change is good and ethical, and I agree, it's an ethical, moral choice, considering we set those countries on fire. If you notice, Joe Scarborough, even within the context of his conversation, can't bring up U.S. policy regarding foreign policy, drug laws, or for that matter, the coups that have been fomented as early as Hillary Clinton, as early as Evo Morales just a few years ago. They had massacres in that country as a result of that coup. I guess the point I'm making here is whether it's ethical, whether it's moral, whether it's right, meaning for Joe Biden to accept the kids to come into the country, it's somewhat of a moot point outside from the cause and effect. The moral, ethical, and right part is just the human perspective of it. The cause and effect is the honest part. And the cause and effect of that was a large number of kids unaccompanied at the border. And you can even make an argument of whether it's moral and ethical at all, considering the conditions that the kids are living through being brought there. I think the point is, though, that if the mom or the family will take that risk, they're taking that risk because whatever is taking place there is worse. They're making a logical choice to come. Scarborough is right. This is not necessarily saying Scarborough is right about everything that he talks about in this very specific point, but on this, he's right. If you're not talking about the coups, if you're not talking about the reasons why those countries were set on fire, and I'm talking about not just 5 years ago, 50 years ago or more, if you're not talking about the kill squads that we were backing in El Salvador or the banana republics, us using our military, us using the CIA to get rid of governments that we didn't particularly like that had this notion of sovereignty, those things are left off the conversation. They're not even on the spectrum of conversation and debate. And so the only thing that you get from the context of the American audience is these countries are basket cases. Because they're basket cases, a large number of people show up at the border. We should help them with charity, but it's not reparations in the sense that we've done something wrong. It's just charity. But Biden's fault. I hope you get my point here. It leaves out a huge range of conversation that would give any honest-to-God real context to why the situation is taking place. And instead narrows the range of debate to just the very specific, Biden needs to do something about the border. And it's entirely Biden's fault about the border. Missing the point that there were successive presidents, successive people in office and everything else that have made that problem worse just on the policies that we've taken domestically. The broken clock is right twice a day. Like, share, and subscribe. And guys, make sure you're subscribed. Google has been unsubscribing people from my channel and apparently some of the other channels. Like, share,